Welcome to Stay Home, Stay Focused. I'm Jack Moline. I am the president of Interfaith Alliance. And my guest today, my special guest is my very dear and longtime friend, Reverend Vincent Guss, who is going to talk to us about chaplaincy in these times. But before we get to that, Vincent, tell me how you're doing.
I'm doing well. I've never experienced anything like this, like everybody else, but I'm hunkered down here in Alexandria and surviving and in fact taking time of solace and time to slow down, which is hard for me, and I'm trying to enjoy it.
So without going into too much personal information about you, I know you had some orthopedic surgery over the course of the last year. Has this sequestering interfered with your ability to continue your recovery?
Not at all. I pretty much finished my physical therapy for the 2 hip replacements I've had. Unfortunately, I had an infection in one of them. Fortunately, that happened before this terrible pandemic hit. I've completed my therapy for that, and I'm still doing a little bit of occupational and physical therapy, but I'm doing well.
Good, glad to hear it. And what are you doing for yourself to help you keep focused on something other than washing your hands and keeping your loved ones safe?
That's a good question. Marianne, with whom I live, and I take walks daily. I'm trying to increase my exercise since I've been pretty much indolent for the past 2 years. I think doing some more reading. I haven't done a lot of reading in my life, except those things I had to read, which is so much, and I enjoyed that. And this is the gathering. In my Christian faith, we believe that the dynamic gathering of people together forms the church, or in Greek, the ecclesia. And I've not had that, and the sacraments to go along with that. Jack, you blessed me this past week with the Seder, the virtual Seder, and that was the biggest blessing I had this Easter.
Well, your ecclesia this year, I think, was 2 people. So
that's correct.
one of the smallest churches to which you've ever belonged.
Amen.
So Vincent, tell me a little bit. Tell me and the people who are watching and listening a little bit about yourself and how you wound up in the ministry of chaplaincy, hospital chaplaincy particularly.
That's a long story, but I'll try to abbreviate it. When I was in college, I struggled about what kind of vocation I wanted to do. I certainly did not want to do what my father did, and he was a parish pastor, a Lutheran pastor in rural Pennsylvania. And yet there was something during my seminary, in my college years, that was drawing me towards seminary. And so indeed, I enrolled in seminary, but did not know what the heck I was doing there until I did my first clinical pastoral education. And that showed me what I eventually wanted to do, and where I spent the majority of my career, that is to be a chaplain, a hospital chaplain to people who were not just rural Pennsylvania, Protestant, middle-class, white Lutherans, but people of all different varieties of religion or no religion, and yet try to identify the spirituality of each person that would help in that healing. That's what's always excited me. It was my first love and vocation. And my second love was ethics, but we can get to that later.
Well, we're going to get to that now, because I know that you've spent so many years comforting people individually, helping them through the crises that often land them in a hospital. And it helped you develop this interest in ethics, which you now teach at Georgetown. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So tell us a little bit about what you're teaching to your students.
Pardon me, will you repeat that, please?
Tell me what you're teaching to your students.
Mostly the principles of ethics that can be applied, especially in pandemics like this. What occurs to me most is the 4th principle of ethics, which is justice, distributive resources of those who can best utilize those resources when they're very rare, such as ventilators or medical services. We talk about autonomy, which is the 1st principle, where people have the right to self-determine in terms of what their own medical decision may be in conjunction with their physician. Fancy words like beneficence, which means doing what's in the best interest, and the real fancy word non-beneficence, which is a nickel word for doing no harm. So trying to balance all those things sometimes those different principles come into conflict. That is what we do at Georgetown, to talk to the medical students how to apply those principles.
I know that you have faced challenges as a chaplain in dealing with people who are highly contagious or presumed to be highly contagious during the course of your long career. Um, what are the special challenges for chaplains in circumstances like this where their comfort is essential, but the personal danger is also very real?
I remember back to the first time in which I actually met and worked with Dr. Fauci during the AIDS epidemic. When we all, at that time, again, under President Reagan, we did not have a friendly government that would address the issues head on. And so what we did on the front lines was try to administer to disease and to people having that disease, HIV, in ways that we didn't know what was going to happen to us. Thing is to have the courage to be with those persons as a chaplain, to be intentionally present with that person, to try to identify what spirituality made sense of them, whether it was a particular religion or a particular group or whatever, and do it again with courage, but intentional, positive regard of that person to help them get in touch with what was most meaningful to them. And so we had the PPE, the gowns and the gloves and even face masks, because we did not know how AIDS at that time was spread. And eventually we did know that, but it was a scary time where people like you, who are my volunteer chaplains, and others in the community, they just didn't know what they're getting into, but they took it on with courage and a sense of their own identity as chaplains.
So I know that when you are bedside with people and you offer to pray with them or for them or to comfort them, sometimes touch is as important as words. Is that possible with all the layers of personal protective equipment that people have to wear in order to have contact with coronavirus patients?
I haven't ministered to people in the current crisis yet, but all I can go back to is when we were dealing with people with AIDS or the H1N1 virus. I think touch, to answer your question, is essential and important. There are ways you can do it if you protect yourself, gloves, and show in your face, if you're not totally covered with a mask, with your eyes, the total regard you have for that person. The whole essence of chaplaincy is intentional presence and being with them in a physical way. Now, of course, you don't want to endanger yourself or others whom you are in contact. So it requires some degree of care and self-care. But as much as that's possible under the circumstances, I think it is possible.
So I'm going to give you the opportunity to sort of deputize everybody who's watching this, because everybody is dealing with somebody who is dealing with coronavirus. In fact, I will tell you, I had a call from one of my kids this week who discovered that the father of a friend is perhaps facing the end of his life because of complications of COVID-19. And my child asked me, what do I say to my friend in these circumstances that can be helpful? How would you advise in those circumstances?
I've actually had that experience. One of my physical therapists came down with COVID-19, and so I had to be basically quarantined, even for my partner, for 14 days. And it was a scary time, even for me. But what I said to my therapist was, unfortunately by telephone only, but saying, I'm here, my thoughts are with you, and more than that, you can call anytime, day or night. Just knowing that even if we can't be together in person, we are in spirit and over the telephone or by computer or like we're doing right now, whatever, I'm here for you. And I think that unconditional positive encouragement is essential. And I think that all you can do is what you can do without endangering yourself or others more.
And I also hear you talking about, along with your previous comment, the notion of being present in the moment,
Right.
Not theologizing and not revisiting past actions that may have led to this point, but just being present in the moment for a friend, a colleague, a compatriot. That's great. I don't want anybody to think that they're now equipped to be a hospital chaplain, but it is certainly great wisdom coming from you.
It's about reflective listening.
Good. That's a great word. Tell me just a word or two about reflective listening.
I think, as you were saying, just being present with the person, listening to their tones, their feelings, maybe the words they're saying are masking things that are actually deeper, but not to confront that in a harsh way, but in a way letting that person hear what you hear them saying, and then they can either correct you or say, yeah, you got it. And I really appreciate being heard. I think
Terrific.
that's it.
It's terrific. Vincent, a lot of people are dealing with the same chronic or emergent health problems that they would be dealing with if we did not have this focus on coronavirus. People who have diabetes or a heart condition or something that requires medical attention. What, as an ethicist and a chaplain, do you say to people who are considering whether they should put a burden on the healthcare system right now for something that seems, in the face of all of this going on, like it's less significant?
That's a very good question. And in fact, I've had the opportunity to reflect on the fact I feel gratitude that my orthopedic issues of the past few years are behind me. And I'm not sure what I would really do right now if I had that in front of me. All I can say is those who are going through issues that can't be addressed right now because of the emergency pandemic, understand that suffering has meaning. I'm not saying that God or some other force put that on you, but try to find some meaning in that suffering and what it can do to mindfully reduce the suffering until it can be attended to.
It's a good piece of advice. Perhaps a more difficult question to deal with in terms of health is not so much physical health. If you have a pain in your knee, you can take an analgesic for it. If you are aware of what your conditions are in terms of your immune system, you can be careful about it. But when it comes to mental health, this kind of isolation can often exacerbate problems that require regular attention and adjustment, in some cases of medication, because of the new circumstances. What do we do about that?
Let me respond with a kind of amusing statistic. Maybe it's not amusing, I'm not sure these days. But a few years ago, Ireland had drafted similar laws that we have against drunk driving. For obvious reasons, they didn't want people driving from the pub and they were drunk and kill someone. When they established that law, many of the people, especially farmers living on their own, were depressed because they wouldn't go to the pub for fear of being arrested for drunk driving. And so the suicide rate went sky high. That's a fact in Ireland in the past few years. I am concerned about the mental health when people are totally isolated. What's most important is to ventilate your feelings to others. People who live in the hallway or your condo or your neighbor, if you can trust them with your deepest feelings, your pastor or rabbi or priest, try to be in touch with that community. One of the main things as a chaplain I've tried to do is connect people with their own community. It doesn't replace chaplaincy, it enhances it, because working together with the clergy or with others who are important to you spiritually, to let your feelings shared among those whom you can trust. And of course, good exercise, a sense of mindfulness, I think that can help in dealing with the issues of isolation.
And those of us who subscribe to a belief system, whether it's a faith community or a more secular philosophy, can also be proactive about reaching out to folks like that and making it known that we're available. I think you'd probably agree that you can't force your presence on somebody else.
No.
But you can make it known, and you can make it known regularly without being intrusive.
Absolutely.
So it's a good thing for people to do. Absolutely correct. Vincent, can someone self-chaplain?
To a small extent. The essence of chaplaincy is dialogue, or dialogue with families or individuals. Uh, I say you can do it to a small extent because you can be aware of your own feelings, or write them down, lift them up in prayer or meditation or just silence. I think there are tools you can use, but the essence of a chaplain, I think, is to another individual who has the training to listen to feelings and to help the person define their own meaning for those feelings. That question is yes and no.
Yes and no.
A
So
little bit yes, but no.
it, as a stopgap measure, you can start by taking care of yourself, but
Absolutely.
in the end, you're going to be much happier, and it'll be much more effective with a partner who can, as you said, do reflective listening with you. I'm going to ask you one more big question before I hand you, I think, a little more of a softball. We're seeing these horrible situations where cases are peaking and overwhelming the healthcare system, where there is a shortage of life-saving equipment and an overabundance of patients who need it. From an ethicist point of view, what are the principles that are involved in deciding who gets a ventilator, who gets a hospital bed, who gets the necessary treatment?
As I alluded to earlier, I think it has to do with who can be best served and who can. What I mean by that is who can be take best advantage of what is offered. In other words, if you have a 98-year-old man who has cancer, he goes on a ventilator, depriving a person who is younger. Doesn't mean the person who is younger has a more valuable life, but maybe that person, well, would have more of a chance to survive. It's a very difficult thing to decide. It's called utilitarian ethics, but then you have the ontological ethics. When you say the first person, those who can afford it and can purchase it can have it. That is not my ethical system. I think those who can most benefit from the resources should be the ones chosen. Now, you have other ethics. There's that when penicillin was first invented in the 1940s by African-American scientists, World War II was just breaking out. In Africa, they decided to give the penicillin to those who could get back into the fight rather than those who were more badly damaged. Now, you can argue that between utilitarian ethics or the ontological ethics, but I think this decision then was to give to those who were less injured. The way they were injured, by the way, was through syphilis or through other kinds of gonorrhea.
I didn't ask you what the injury was.
Yes, I just wanted to tell you, is the way how you look at ethics.
But what you're illustrating here, and I think is critical for us to think about going forward, because we're not going to be able to do this in the immediate circumstance, is that having folks like you who have thought seriously and studied deeply and prayed on the question of ethics is important in preparing for these circumstances, so that we're not sort of grasping at straws when the anticipatable circumstances face us and we have to make life and death decisions. If we have a structure we can rely on, no structure is going to make us feel better about granting care to someone and denying it to someone else. But at least there will be some way that we can do that has been reasoned and isn't subject to simply who yells the loudest or waves around a lot of cash. So
exactly.
All right, we always end these conversations with this question. What do you recommend to people who are watching and listening as something that can inspire and engage them, other than focusing on dealing with the effects of this pandemic on their loved ones?
Call Rabbi Jack Moline. He's always. I think just being in touch. What we're feeling most severely now is the lack of community. And one of the things a chaplain does is to connect the person to their community. So if there's any community, whether it be a church, a synagogue, a temple, whether it be a card club or a bowling club or whatever you're involved with, or you have no one, no clubs or family or whatever, just people around you. Just go out, um, be as friendly as you can, and it's
From the appropriate distance.
it doesn't say that. The appropriate distance.
Great. So, my friends, you see the worth of having friends, lifelong friends like Vincent Guss from this conversation. We are glad you joined us today. If you're watching us live or later on Facebook, listening to us from home, please, as I ask you each day, stay home and stay focused.
It's my honor to be with you.